Recording. Well, welcome guys to this special edition, the special module. And I'm just gonna give you some technical tips before we begin. So basically, Carla is going to be on the image for you to see. You're gonna be listening to my voice, like I'm listening to her, but the voice that you guys are going to be receiving is my voice. So it's going to be a woman image with a man's voice. But let's see. And basically it's that. And if you see, Carla has like a table behind her, a graph. And in that table, she is going to be explaining what she's going to be explaining. Of course, it's very small in the image. That's why I sent you guys in the WhatsApp group. If you look at the WhatsApp group, you will see a photo of it. And it would be, if you can, have that photo because, she'll be, when she's talking, she'll be pointing to the different areas that she'll be explaining, okay? And at the same time, there's another photo I sent to you guys on the WhatsApp, which is, it's the parts of the brain, okay? These parts of the brain are going to be mentioned, and it's for you guys to have an idea where these areas of the brain are located, all right? So I think that's about it. I guess the best way of asking your questions would be through the chat. And if Carla, because Carla does know quite a lot of English, so maybe she'll understand it directly. If not, I'll just translate whatever is needed. Also, you can use a mic, but I think in this occasion, probably the chat would be better. But as I say, Carla understands English pretty well. She can understand it, so let's see how it goes. Excellent. So you guys can hear me all right. You can see Carla all right. Technically, everything is ready to go, yeah? If there's any moments to say or suggest something, this is the moment. So I think we can begin with Carla. So let's go. Oh, by the way, sorry, just to see how we're going to organize it. We're going to organize it in 3 blocks of 1 hour, basically to let me breathe for a bit because of the intensity of the translation. So so we're going to do 2 little kind of rests, 5-10 minutes, and so we're going to organize it in 3 blocks. So let's begin. Good morning to everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning. I'm gonna take this off here. Okay, so for today, I'm gonna feel like a crazy person because I'm gonna be speaking without anyone listening to me and without listening to anyone. It's like a conversation with myself. Well, I hope for the next opportunities for the practice, hopefully I can do this in English, directly in English, the talk. But while I have my personal translator. Okay. Today, I'm going to talk about what is called the stages of evolution. These stages of evolution are stages which have been defined by science through the studies of the geologists who have described the stages of evolution. What I'm going to explain is to join the information of Hammer, the Dr. Hammer, with the history of Earth. But in order to do this, for you to see the sense of knowing the story of the earth related with our own body, the most important thing is for you to understand first what the information of Hammer is about, and after doing the small summary, I'm going to join this information with the history of the earth. When one begins to understand Dr. Hammer's information, they begin to realize that the body that we have has the whole history, the whole evolutionary story and tools that the earth has been able to acquire in its journey. So for those who do not know about Dr. Hammer, let me talk about his information. He is a doctor from Germany, which in the 80s, in the year 80, he begins to describe some describes certain discoveries, which he ends up calling the 5 biological laws. These 5 biological laws what they do is to turn around completely the understanding that the conventional science and about the process what they call illness. So the information of Hammer is controversy, very different from the perspective that we are used to. Its main discovery is to become aware that the symptoms, the biological expressions that we call illnesses, have an origin in the experience of the person's life, meaning they haven't got a kind of like a random cause or uncertain cause, but they end up, it has an origin about what the person's going through in their own lives. We could say then that for Hammer, the symptoms are a biological answer which emerges from the need which hasn't been satisfied, which an individual lives when goes through certain types of conflicts. This means that the individual, before having the symptoms in their lives, have been through a situation which they perceived as a conflict, and not being able to answer or give a solution to that problem. It's like they ask the body for a survival answer. Okay? That is the main kind of background which sustains the discovery of Hammer. So what he does is to join the body with the way of perceiving, that the way that the individual perceives with the environments and the situations they are living in. So what he finally does is to understand the individual in an integral way. as a living being which responds to the changes in the environment. Within Hammer's information, there are one of the laws, which is the third law, where he makes the relationship between what type of symptoms is the person going through with what type of conflict he's living or has lived in his life. That is the law we are going to look in today. That's what we're going to speak today about. But we're going to speak about it from an evolutionary point of view, for you to understand how those biological answers have been processed, managed through the life of the earth. To begin, let's simply, I'm going to explain what it means when we talk in biology about when we talk about an evolutionary stage. The evolutionary stages in the evolution of Earth have a structure which we could divide in the beginning of the stage. That beginning of the stage opens with a challenge, with a biological conflict. There is a development of the stage, which we call the stage of maturing, or the process of maturing of that stage. And there's a moment through that stage which is called a biological, I don't know the word, let's put myth for now, which is, it's that moment after the living of that conflict, after thousands and millions of years, finally life, out of life emerges a structure, a new way, which can respond to that biological conflict. So the biological conflict is the evolutionary motor. A new characteristic, a new biological aptitude emerges from trial and error of the living individuals, of being able to adapt to that challenge which the context proposes. Obviously, this is not something which you can, it is summed up in one experience. Within the evolution of the earth, if there's something clear, is that the individuals or life need a lot of trials. Every time an individual is in front of a challenge and he hasn't got yet the biological aptitude to go through it, the biology enters into a way of functioning which we are going to call a special program. That special program of our day-to-day life, we call it illness. because it's a way that the body works, which doesn't enter within the parameters of normality. If we see it from the point of view that we know, we are going to think that illness is something that is like a mistake, something which is not good. But if we see it from this evolutionary point of view, we can become aware that each time we enter into a special program, what our body is trying to do is to evolve. So the illness would be the way in which biology, life, can embody new aptitudes in order to answer to conflicts. If we see it this way, instead of getting angry when we are ill, we should become happy in a way. Although it's hard, isn't it? But the idea here is to show you how the big scale conflict has generated all the biological aptitudes we have today. And that way, at a micro scale in your daily life, you can begin to understand the importance that the biological process have in your own evolution as a living being. Is everything all right up to here? Are you following? Are you understanding? Okay. It is very difficult to talk so slow. Okay. Yes, continue. So, how can I begin this? The discovery of the third law of hammer. You can see it in a drawing, in a photo that I gave to you with David through the WhatsApp. Let's see if I can find that photo here. Give me a second. See if I can share it with you. Okay, there I can share it with you. Can you see it? Okay. It is kind of big. In this drawing, you could see it's like a summary of the brain, of the human brain, with the division that Hammer makes of the brain according to the embryonic stage which it controls, and taking into consideration or being clear that what type of embryonic is layer it controls each part of the brain, we can know when there's a symptom, being knowing its embryonic origin, what type of brain is controlling that, And when knowing what type of brain controls that, we can know what type of evolutionary conflict it corresponds, the symptom corresponds with. It's complex or sounds complex, but I'm going to try and make it simple. In a general sense, the brain has evolved from an archaic brain to a modern brain. The archaic part of the brain is this brain stem, and it controls the organs of the body which belong or which has its origin in an embryonic layer called endodermal. In order to not confuse the layers, you have to be able to think that evolution of the brain, of the body, and of the earth in the same way. They're related, as if they were layers which are added one upon another. When an organism develops itself in the womb, its development follows the same pattern than the development of any elements in evolution. Within the most inner aspect, you can find the most archaic, meaning that cells, those inner cells, there's going to be an origin. It's going to emerge all the organs which have the function of that archaic stage, like breathing, eating, reproduction. On top of that embryonic level, which is called an endoderm, there is a second layer, which is called mesodermis, which is going to be the origin of all the organs, which have the function of protecting the archaic organs, and all our movement system, the muscles, the bones, and the last, and on top of that mesodermis, there is a layer which is the ectoderm, which originates all the organs which are related with the external environment. So all the organs of our body, all the tissues of our body can be found. You can find their origin, the embryonic origin, to each of these levels: endoderm, mesoderm, ectoderm. And knowing that embryonic origin, we can know what parts of the brain is controlling it, in order to know what type of evolutionary conflict that individual is going through. This means that our day-to-day conflicts have the same logical structure than all the conflicts that the life on Earth has gone through its stages of evolution. What we're going to do now is to look at each of those conflicts and stages so you can recognize the structure of that stage, that evolutionary stage, and associate it with your day-to-day conflicts. Okay? In the graph that you see in the WhatsApp, which is this one here, which is a bit small, there are, in this line of time, more or less, you have the history of the life of the planet at the level of life of the life of the planet Earth, of the part of life of planet Earth, because the Earth as a planet has a lot more history than the living aspects of it, the living organism. Taking into consideration that Earth was generated 4,450 million years ago, the first living cells began to appear 3,800 million years ago. That 3,800 million start the beginning, what we call the first evolutionary stage of life. If you remember that each stage begins with a biological conflict. The first biological conflict that life goes through is the conflict of survival. This survival conflict relates to have the capacity of staying alive. As simple as that. But to have the capacity of staying alive, although it seems simple, it requires for the individual to have many biological aptitudes. So imagine if you can, that you are live, trials of life 3,800 million years ago. The first condition that for life to be possible is the separation or limitation. That means you cannot consider something that is alive that which has not got a limitation, separation. So the first condition is the capacity to be one, to be an individual with a limit. So in this evolutionary stage, what's going to be managed is the answers which are destined to keep this individual existing, alive. In order for the individual to be able to exist, apart from having separation, a limit, a separation, it has to have the capacity to relate with its environment. Because if the individual exists, but it's isolated from the environment, it cannot obtain the resources that it needs to exist. And so it's going to die. So the second condition for there to be able to be life is that the individual which is separated can have a relationship with the environment. That relationship with environment in biology is called metabolism. So within this first stage, it is also going to be configured all the biological answers which are related with this metabolism. And the third condition, in order for there to be life, is that this individual that exists, separated and which is related with its environment, for it to have the capacity of transcendence, meaning that it can embody, have a learning through its experience, and can pass that learning on to the future. So if we had to sum up what are the meaning of life or the main purposes of life, we could say it is to be separated, the separation relationship, and transcendence. Through the first 3,500 million years of life, the organisms which were living in the water continuously were challenged to stay separate, so nothing breaks its limit, to have effective metabolism, relationship, and to be able to transcend. So when we talk about conflict of survival conflict, we are talking about the capacity of keeping these three biological functions in an optimal way. With the human and the superior, the higher mammals, and in the case of the humans and the higher mammals, these biological functions which are required for survival are summed up in have the capacity to breathe, have the capacity to digest,
to excrete and to reproduce,
the capacity of eliminating excretion, and the capacity of reproduction. These biological functions are the most archaic ones. But archaic doesn't mean limited. Archaic means fundamental. Because without these biological functions, there would be no possibility for the human to do any other biological functions. So the survival conflict, it generates a capacity of staying alive, and it is going to answer in the present to situations where the individual perceives its survival threatened for some reason. An example for you to understand me of a survival conflict is, for example, the case that occurs in the lung cancer, with lung cancer. A person who has lung cancer, what it is doing really is responding in a special manner to a situation in which it has perceived a threat of life. The life has been threatened. Why is it death and not another conflict? Why is the threat of dying and not any other conflict? Because the origin, its embryonic origin of the lung alveoles or pulmonary alveoles is the endoderma, which is controlled by the brainstem. And so when knowing its embryonic origin, I know which evolutionary stage that it belongs to. The pulmonary alveoles have its origin, its embryonic origin in the endodermis, because they are the first structures that life generated in order to exchange oxygen with the environment. It comes from that first cells which had to breathe oxygen. Why do they respond to a conflict of death, of dying? Because at an evolutionary sense, when the cell had to learn how to breathe oxygen, that situation for them was of a potential death, because the oxygen was a toxin for them at that moment. Those cells were breathing carbon dioxide. So when an individual is living a situation which it perceives threat of death, a death threat, the most archaic aspects of its brain stem, warns the cells of the lung, of the alveolus, which it is, there's a repetition of a situation which was lived evolutionary 3,800 million years ago. 3,300 million years ago, more or less. And seeing this possibility, the body responds with its archaic memories in order to help the individual to overcome this threat of death. Something that the lung does in the situation is to increase the frequency of breathing. When increasing the frequency of breathing, it gets more oxygen. When it gets more oxygen, this more oxygen goes to the muscles. And with this more oxygen in the muscles, there's more energy to be able to run. So the special program of the lung has the purpose of giving energy to the individual, and so it can get away from that potential danger of death. If just by increasing the frequency is not enough, the frequency of breathing is not enough, then the cells are going to have to multiply themselves, the cells of the lung cells, because more cells breathing more allow more oxygen, which generates more oxygen, which generates more energy. The state of multiplicity of the cells, medicine calls it cancer. But from the point of view of the conventional medicine, it is a state of something that has gone wrong. But from the point of view of this information of Hammer, it is a special state destined to improve the function of the organ, in which can help the individual to run away from that danger of death. Is that understood? The example is understood? Is that understood? The example? Yes, no, yes. So wait. So yeah, just kind of, if just to see you guys, are you able to follow it? Are you able to kind of get the gist? Is it going all right? This is the first time we do this, so give us some feedback. Okay. Any questions? Stop. Okay, so everything is going good. Good. It's embryonic stage. Thanks, Laura, because I couldn't get the word. Embryonic stage, which probably it'll be good to ask Carla what an embryonic stage is. Did you hear? Okay, because I don't think, it's not something that it's not a day-to-day thing, embryonic stage. So explain what that is. Let me explain it short. Embryonic stage.
What's your question?
You know that the conception, the moment of conception, is when the womb, it comes with a spermatozoid. After that union, these two cells become one cell.
Oh yeah, okay.
Which is the zygote. the future baby.
Zygote. Zygote.
These cells, these eggs, begin to multiply very, very, very quickly. But it doesn't multiply without an order. But it has a pre-established order.
Okay.
That pre-established order it's kind of organized in what we call the embryonic stage. A group of cells are stayed in the center of the cells, creating what is called the first stage, which is the endodermis, which it creates the internal organs. The group of cells that go that are built upon that layer are what's called the mesodermis, because it's in the middle. Meso is in the middle, mesodermis, which create the organs, from where the organs that protect the internal organs are created, and the last group of cells, which are in the outer layer, are called ectodermis, and which are going to provide the organs which are in contact with the environment. These embryonic occur in the first 3 weeks. When after these weeks, each of these layers in these embryonic layers begin to generate the organs and finally develop a fetus as we know it. If you see in internet the embryonic human development, you can see that when we're in the mother's belly, let's say, we review the whole of evolution on Earth. We go from being a little fish, let's say, to be a kind of reptile, kind of toad, to be like a monkey, and finally we form the human. The seeing that the cells in the stomach, in the womb, follow that order. There's an order. That order is there because of the memory the cells bring from evolution. So it is not the same type of cells of the ones that respond to the endodermis than the ones that respond to the ectodermis, which is a more modern layer. Is this understood better, what these layers are? Okay, just if Susan, can you put your mic off? If not, Carla, can you? Because I can't do it from here.
Can I do what?
Can you put your microphone off?
Off. Okay.
Let me tell Carla. I'll tell Carla, because I can't do it because she's got. Apaga el micrófono de Susan, del que pone iPad 2. Okay, a bit of Spanglish. No, now she has, yeah. Excellent. Okay, this is the Spanish lessons. Okay, will be charged after with it. Okay, so I will pass you that in the invoice. Okay, is the stages, the embryonic stages, the idea, is it understood where it comes from? Excellent. Okay. Yes, all good. All good. It's not important right now for you to learn this. It's just, if I don't name it, you won't understand the relationship between the symptom and the evolutionary stage. So to remind and refresh, the evolution follows like this arrow. So at the beginning, we have what we call the archaic cells or archaic functions. And when we're moving in evolution, these cells acquire new states of, modern, more kind of modern aptitudes. The closest that we have in time where we have more new cells than the beginning of the time. But for them to be newer or older doesn't mean better or worse. But that the older cells respond a function which are more fundamental, the older, and the new ones respond to functions which are more modern, which are necessary for life, but without the old ones, they wouldn't be able to exist. Okay, there's a question. Harold is asking, does Dr. Hammer challenge that smoking causes cancer? From the discovery of Hammer, the cancer wouldn't be caused by the smoking, but by the fear of dying of the person who is smoking. So this would be the reason for why a lot of people who smoke during their lives and they have no symptoms, and other people who smoke do have those symptoms. We could say that the important thing isn't so much to have the cigarette or not, but of course, to not smoke is going to have a more healthy lung. But the important thing in the case of lung cancer is to see if this person has lived a situation which could be a fear of death. Question, and maybe the fear of death comes by the perception that the cigarette is killing them. Okay? So a lot of people that the person can associate, but that themselves or their environment, that the cigarette is a threat, it's like a poison, it can create death, and it can respond with lung cancer. Also, for example, another event that can create a lung cancer is to go to the doctor, and for the doctor gives you a diagnose, which is very bad, which is not very good. For example, you have liver cancer. The doctor gives you the diagnosis, you have liver cancer. So we have associated cancer with death. And this is called a conflict of diagnosis. A diagnosed conflict can generate a special program in the lung. So the person now begins to have two cancers, in the lung and in the liver. Medicine says that the lung cancer comes from metastasis from the liver. But really what it is a second conflict that's been activated of fearing death because of the diagnosis. And just to say that it's very common that the second cancer tends to be lung cancer. But for them to connect, like, why? Okay. I know that the information of Hammer is very different, but from his information, you can find the meaning of many clinical issues that the modern medicine can't really give an answer to. So to close this subject, there will only be a special program in the lung as an answer to a conflict of fear of death. The conflict of fear of death could be real, like, for example, it could be like more symbolic, more virtual. Like, for example, if I have fear that if I'm continue smoking, this is going to kill me someday. Or a doctor comes and says, you're going to die because of smoking. Is this understood? Yes. Again, any questions, whatever? Anything you're not understanding, you're picking up, just we can use the chat, okay? Good. Let me finish with the first stage and we do a break. And in an evolutionary sense, the first stage of life on Earth, which responds to the conflict of survival, it goes from the 3,800 million years to 375 million years ago. It's about 3,500 million years of trial and error, which took life to be able to stay alive. The conflicts of the first stage of survival, Hammer calls them conflicts of essential, like grabbing. It's like chewing onto something, like catching the prey, like biting, grabbing. Why? Why is it called this? Because he understands that life relates with these, trapping with, the mouth in order to stay alive. So oxygen becomes something you want to grab. Food is something you want to grab, essential thing to grab. Water is something essential to get in. That's why in the areas of the body which respond to the conflicts of survival, we find, for example, the pulmonary alveoles, which is the breathing. Many parts of the digestion system, like the stomach and the intestine, yeah? A part of the kidneys, which is called collecting tubules, and the uterus and the prostate, in the case with the reproduction kind of conflicts. This is an example of types of organs. There are many other types. But for you to understand this first conflict, this first stage, we are going to say that me as a human being or living being, if I have a symptom, for example, which is related with my kidney, the collecting tubules on my kidneys, the first thing I have to know is that I am going through a challenge, a survival challenge. Something which has happened as a possibility of existing. Okay? So my kidney is answering to that situation. In the case of the kidney, Hammer describes a kind of syndrome, which is called prófugo. Laura, can you look prófugo? The conflict of the refugee, the refugee problem. What? It's the situation, okay? It's a situation of the individual feels out of the water. Fugitive or refugee. In a literal sense, this reflects the moment where life left water to be able to begin to go on the land. The essential thing was water, to have water. The essential thing was to be able to have water. Now that it goes to an environment that there's not as much water, it has to generate a program where it is allowed to retain the water requires to live, so to have the water, keep it inside. Thanks that life went through this conflict, we have kidneys. So when a person has a conflict of retaining liquid, what it is happening at a very unconscious, archaic way is the same conflict that that the fish had when it was like leaving. That something is happening which it perceives as it's not going to have any references which contain it, any containing references. It's like they lose the containing references. So it has an existential conflict of absolute change of the environment. Put your this type of conflict, for example, occurs with refugee people. The refugees have these types of conflict. No, I thought about your example, like you went through a conflict like this, so use your example and maybe they'll understand it also. Okay? So a personal example of this type of conflict happened to me when I left my house when I was 18, I think, to study to another province. You have to understand that the opening of the program is very unconscious. When I left my house to go to study in this province, in 3 months, I increased my weight in 12 kilos. I had liquid retention because for my brainstem, the leaving my family environment was like getting out of the water, like the fish getting out of the water. So while I was with a conflict of not generating a new kind of environment which could contain me and make me feel calm, my body retained liquids. When finally I was able to generate a new environment of containing me at university, those 12 kilos of overweight, I lost them in 2 months because my brainstem was reading that there was no perception of a fugitive or refugee conflict. If for you to see possible solutions to a conflict, I could have gone back to my family in where I live in Mendoza. I could have done that. But if I go back home, I'm again in the water. So the biological program closes. But what I decided was to go through the conflict and generate a new environment of which contain me. When generating a new environment which contain me, the special biological program closed also. But it doesn't close only because I went back to my previous states, but because I was able to transcend to a new stage of maturity. The biological intention of the conflict is for us to mature when we go through these conflicts. and in the meanwhile we go through them, it provides me like a resource which can help me, like an archaic memory, in order to leave the water. Is this understood? So we could say that the conflicts are a mechanism of life, of maturity, transcendence, and evolution. Yeah. Okay. And we're seeing this, but with the evolutionary explanation of how Earth has done this, we are also doing it in our lives. Yeah. Because we have talked about that the conflict is actually a solution of evolution. It's a mechanism of evolution. But this is a good way of seeing it in a more biological way, okay? So, and that our body is connected to that memory, and that. Okay, good. I think if there's any questions from you guys, and if not, we could have a little break and we continue, because there's 5 stages. So we've only been through the first one, and we can continue with the second one, okay? If you have any questions, just leave it here. And remember that you've got this which Carla is using, this image that Carla is using, you've got the photo in the WhatsApp group, okay? So 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes, have a cup of tea or something. I'll replace my brain with a new one, and we'll be back. Okay. Bye. Okay. So what is cancer as a biological function? I explained it with the example of the lung example, but cancer would be a special way of functioning of the organs which respond to the biological conflict that the individual is having, which this biological modification, what it generates is an improvement of the function. So it allows the organ to improve the function of the organ than before. Like, for example, the lungs. More lung cells, cancer, improves the function of the lungs to get more oxygen. It's very different from what we have seen through the conventional medicine. Okay. When you study the process of cancer, as Hammer explains it, and you see how those cells are functioning, it has that the explanation of Hammer has more coherency than the explanation of the conventional medicine. Okay, let's continue. Okay. Okay. Let's go to the second stage of evolution. This stage is a stage which goes from when the amphibians appear to when the reptiles appear. In the first stage, we're talking about the appearance of the first cells in the water life up to the moment that it leaves the water. In this second stage, we're talking about that moment going from amphibian to reptile, where the main conflict for life there is the protection. Understanding protection as to have the capacity of keeping the individual integrity, physical integrity, of that what could be a threat from the external environment. So the conflict of protection, it's a conflict of a threat to one's physical integrity. The most simple example to see this is the generation of structures of protection, like the dermis, or the membranes which cover the organs. Laura, fascias, please, which have the function of the mechanical function or the protection of one of the physical aggression. But for you to imagine, if you could travel 375 million years ago, one of the main characteristics of leaving water is that you don't have enough membrane of separation in order to leave to stop what's outside. For example, the ultraviolet light. So going through the conflict of protection, it generates in the living individuals the appearance of membranes of protection, which are more effective to protect themselves from that external attack. That is why the organs which respond to the conflict of protection are organs which are related with the protection of the individual, of the organs, and in the case of the individuals of the group, as we are, also the protection of the people in the nest, in our nest. So in the table I've given you, the scheme, you can see that this conflict of protection has the parts of the body which they correspond with: the dermis, the corium, the fascias. I think it's fascias. It's the membrane which covers the vital organs. That's the fascias is the membrane that covers and protects the vital organs. It translates as fascia. It's the same word. It's fascia. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Thanks, Laura. So, an example of a conflict of protection is, for example, let me see an example. The answers from the dermis, like a dirt, lunar, a mole, are answers of perceptions of an attack that you have lived through. In the human case, in the case of us as humans, this mechanism of protection, as the previous example, can occur in a real attack, like somebody comes and hits me, or it can activate itself with a symbolic virtual conflict. For example, somebody hurts my integrity, insulting me and speaking something bad about me, dirtying my name. Just a question that probably arises, that protection, it kind of feels like protection is very related with survival. Like, why are they two different conflicts? If, you know, I'm protecting myself because something's going to kill me, why is it different? They are connected, of course, but why are they different? They are different because the function of protection is more related with to keep the integrity, that which was generated in the survival stage. What's going to happen with the stages, when we begin to see them, we realize that there is no real separation between them, but each stage is an improvement of the first three functions of survival: separation, metabolism, and transcendence. It's an improvement of those three basic, but adapted to the new space-time that life is living there. Okay? So protection is referred to mechanisms, biological mechanisms, which are destined to keep the integrity, which is to keep myself alive. But the type of perception, which is there's something that is attacking from outside. If you remember, in the first stage, there was no like really external conflict. It's me. How can I stay alive? How can I feed myself? How can I breathe? How can I can relate myself? In the second stage, now that I already exist and still I can keep myself alive, how can I keep this effective? My separation of the environment. How can I protect it so the external media doesn't break my individual integrity? If we could make it a bit more human to understand it better, here we're going to find all the conflicts related with the perception that there's something out there that wants to harm me. Literally, as there's killers or there's thieves, sometimes it's, or symbolic or virtual, as the political idea of another person attacks my political point of view. So here, this biological program is going to activate when we perceive that something outside is going to be a threat for what I am, my integrity. In the animal kingdom, in the animal kingdom, the conflict tends to be literally a literal threat. It's only going to activate when there's a real conflict, like a lion comes and bites a zebra's leg, for example. It's a literal attack, because in the animal kingdom there's not a symbolic construction. But as a human, we can wake up, activate the same type of conflict in the dermis and the corium, which the zebra activates after it's been bitten, because somebody came and told me, for example, that I'm a bad runner, I'm not a good runner, and so that's an attack to the integrity. Yeah? So I know that this is complex, like in 2 different levels, because what is real is that the real conflicts, biological real conflicts, like what occurs in nature, but the human has created a world of interpretation about the conflicts it has. So it associates the way that the zebra is being attacked with the way that the biology responds to the rays of the sun, which both can be as deathly. So the conflict of protection opens when I feel that something is attacking my integrity. For example, a very common example is the peritonitis. Wait. Laura, peritonitis. I think it's peritonitis, but if she can look for that. Okay, yeah. Peritonitis, yeah. Well, okay, continue. Which occurs when I go to the doctor and he says my appendix is swollen up. The appendix, yeah, is swollen up. As I know that the people who have their appendix, when it swells up, as I know that they are operated on, my cerebellum, in this case, that part of the brain, responds to the possibility of that surgery activating a program in the peritoneal, which generates an inflammation of the peritonitis. But if you can see, the peritonitis only occurs in certain cases of the appendix. Some people have it. It only occurs in those people who see the possible surgery and see that as an attack of the integrity of their abdomen. So it's the perception. So when it perceives the attack of the integrity of its abdomen, the peritonitis, which is the fascias, this membrane which protects the abdomen, gets kind of, it fattens, it swollens, generating what we call as peritonitis. This is very simple to see in the second stage, because when it perceives an attack, what it tends to do, the organ, is to become bigger, like swallow itself, to grow. That is why, for example, when there's attack on the dermis, the deep part of the skin, the growing, which we call skin cancer, what they are wanting to do is to protect the area where the attack was perceived. Another example, which is more simple, is the example of the mammalian glands, which is a part of the body that responds to the conflicts of protection. In the mammalian glands, we're not only talking about a protection of one's own self, we are talking also about a protection of those who are part of our nest. So, for example, a situation where a mother perceives a danger, a threat to the integrity of its baby, this program can occur in the mammalian gland, in the breast, which can increase the mammalian gland, the cells, they increase, because biologically, when the baby is in danger, a way of keeping it alive is to breastfeed it. So the conflict of protection to the baby, to the produces in the mother the growing of the mammalian gland of the mother, which clinically is called mammalian gland cancer. Right. If the living of that conflict was not real, imagine, for example, it's not that the child is going to be killed literally, but she thinks or perceives the possibility that in the future something is going to happen to her child. That is where the biological programs activate. In the case of humans, doesn't really make sense, because if it wants to defend itself in front of a threat that really doesn't exist. It's imagined. In nature, the conflicts of the animals have two possibilities. Or it has an immediate solution, or it dies. In the case of the humans, while having virtual conflicts, which are not literally threatening life, we can keep special programs open during many years, which finally generates for us to die, but because of a biological fatigue. Most of the time, the deaths that occur of cancer occur because of the situation, because of the fatigue, of the limited capacity humans have of managing conflicts. But not because of the program. It's not because of the cancer in itself, because of the fatigue of the program going on so long. No, I just have a little, like a personal example of the mammalian cancer for them to situate. My brother started to have a very strange illness where part of his body went numb. And one of the diagnoses was that he was going to have multiple sclerosis, which my mother, of course, that possible diagnosis, my mother took it very, like it was a big problem for her. And what happened very shortly, because my brother got better, and very, very close, my mother got a breast cancer. And it's related to this, which Carla's explaining. It was a response, the body was trying to protect her child because of an attack to its integrity. Okay, so just to give these personal examples, and you probably maybe can understand certain things that occurred in your lives or your parents' lives, and okay, which is also interesting with this information. Okay. Okay, last example with stage 2, and let's go to stage 3. For example, one that is very common is the acne. Zits. And acne is a biological program which activates from the deep part of the skin, the dermis, when the individual feels an attack of its integrity, for example, in the area of its face. A very common example, if a person feels that he's ugly, when the body perceives this conflict, it generates a whole biological process of protection of the dermis, which in its resolution phase, it ends up coming with pus with the zits, the pus and the zits. That is the repairing. But in the human, when seeing the zits or when seeing the acne, the conflict reactivates for the protection of its image. So it enters into a cycle of a biological program, like a vicious cycle. You see, this is a very good example of a biological program, which we call chronicle sometimes, which hasn't got a real sense in the individual's life. Because for the individual to be ugly, it's not a danger to its existence. Only if it's very important for that human. Yes? Okay, good up to here? Okay, good. All good? Let's go with the third stage. In the first stage, we already got the possibility of existing. In the second stage, we can exist in an environment which is different than the one that I have inside. And the third stage, we begin to obtain what we call aptitude or capacities. Evolutionary, this third stage appears, and the stage of the reptiles. From reptiles to mammals. Just imagine that we are in 300 million years ago, we were able to protect ourselves and leave the water. And now we have another challenge that Earth is proposing us, which is what? The challenge? What is the challenge? And I didn't hear what the challenge was. You said that the next challenge is to move. Because up to here, we're talking more about the life in the water and in the shore of the water. The next kind of challenge is to like move into land. This is the challenge of the reptiles. In order to go through it, it has to go. It faces itself with a frustration, which the amphibians have like modified legs, which are like more like kind of flying, like wings. So that structure, it's not very useful to run very big distances, you see? So what it's going to do is modify its structure in order to be more apt, have a greater aptitude in order to move. That is why this third stage it has a conflict, which is a conflict of aptitude. Aptitude in the sense to be able to have the capacity of moving oneself in order to live in different types of environments. In our body, at the level of our body, the conflict of the third stage affects the organs which are related with the movement, muscles, bones, articulations, and the glands which are associated. Here, the conflict is the following. I have a challenge, but I haven't got the way to go through it. So, in the meanwhile, my wings can begin to become legs. I'm going to be kind of suffering a biological transformation. Sorry, not wings, like the little legs of an amphibian, you know, that like a frog, that they're kind of like that, not wings. from those legs to go, from those kind of like amphibians to become more like legs. Okay, yeah. If we can, for you to go back into that amphibian that has to become a reptile, for the reptile who has to become a bird. What is the direct living experience of that situation? It's a frustration. The sensation, the feeling of non-aptitude. when a living being is living a feeling of not having aptitude, not being, its biology knows that it has to change its form, its biological structure. But biologically, this change is a literal change. So, for example, if we are in a job, let's say, which we use our hands to work, but I feel I'm not good at doing that job, I'm going to begin to have in the articulation of my hands a loss of the cells. We call this osteoporosis, this losing the cell tissue in the articulations. The biological intention is for us not to lose the bone material. It is for my body's going to try to do it again to regenerate the bone, because for my body of not being apt and not having aptitude is the symptom that I'm not fit. I haven't got the right way of doing it. So in people who suffer symptoms related with bones, muscles, articulations, are people who feel deeply not apt, they haven't got the aptitude, not fit, not. And while they feel deeply not apt, they are going to open the spatial biological program, which is going to make a loss of material while the conflict is active, and to kind of fill in those gaps when the conflict is being solved. Imagine now a football player or a sports person, any types of sports person that depend on their physics, their body, their muscles, its bones, to be able to show that it is apt, that it's fit. When they have a match, a game, where for some reason it isn't apt, isn't fit, and if it's a problem for the person, they're going to activate maybe a knee problem in the elbow. The thing with the conflicts of the third stage is that while they are active, when it produces this decrease of the function, it makes you be less qualified, less apt, less. So the conflict activates itself stronger. If we understood that decrease, that moment decrease of the function is necessary for an improvement of the bone or of that, and we start trying to force ourselves, trying to be better at that point, we wouldn't take our muscles and our bones to the stress that we tend to take it. The important issue of this third stage is that the earth generates it, so the individuals can be fit or apt to live in the environment they are living in. The problem of this third stage with the human is that the human has their sense of value linked with of how others are seeing it, of how it should be. So while the human has its reference outside, it is always going to have a conflict of not being fit, because the aptitude, the fitness, refers to to have the capacity of living one's life, and not about having the expect the living to an idea of what I should be. This conflict is the basis of all our conflicts related with comparing, because we use the structure of the third stage in order to compare ourselves with others and to see who is better. When in reality, the structure of the third stage has this meaning of how I can improve myself being myself, not how can I be better than you. Because the mechanism of comparing, when we put it outside, it's the same as if the reptile compares itself with a bird and feels less because it can't fly, when really the reptile is excellent at what it does, and the bird has a different function because it had to adapt to a different type of environment. So the key of the third stage is not to become all the same, but to be able to kind of accept our differences, not to be all better than some ideal of a person, but to be the best version of oneself. When for a certain reason we can't feel fit or apt, our body is going to activate a archaic biological destined to change our form. And that is why people have muscle bone kind of issues. Is this understood, the third stage? Do you have an example, specific example in your life or somebody's life? Okay. Third stage. I'm looking for an example. For example, the example of what's a homemade home wife who works with her hands and orders and cleans the dishes and so on. And the family doesn't recognize that person's work. The important thing isn't that the family recognizes that work, but she is looking for that acceptance, that approval. So he begins to have problems in the articulation of her hands because she feels that she doesn't do her job very well because nobody is kind of thanking her. While she feels that she's not apt, she's not fit, her hands begin to deteriorate. What would be the possible solution for this person? Two types of solution. For her family to tell her that, or him, that she is the best homemade in the world. So she's going to feel fit. Or for her to stop caring about what the external view is, because she can see that she's good in what she does. She can find a value within, without the need of external validation. If the person is in a continuous I'm worth, I'm not worth, I'm worth, I'm not worth, like in a circle, the bone is going to lose the cell and fill in, lose the bone and fill in the bone, and at the end she's going to have arthritis. Okay. For example, this is something that it tends to happen to old people, yeah. But the way that medicine sees it, because they're getting old and the bones are getting old, but Hammer would also say that no, it's a perception that they are not useful anymore because they're getting old. So really, it's the perception of them not feeling useful in whatever area, hands or feet or whatever area it is. And that is actually the cause of the problem. Like when people become, what do you call it? When people, they stop working. What they call it? When they stop working, they retire. When people retire, they have these type of conflicts. Mm-hmm. Under the perspective of Hammer, all these types of illness of the elderly are not as the medicine kind of indicates. They are more related of a way of perceiving the elderly age. It's the same in the woman with the menopause. If it was true that the menopause creates the symptoms that we think create, why are there women that go through menopause and don't have those symptoms? Those women most probably are women who don't have the problem with this kind of pass of time, or to lose their reproductive role as a woman. It's not a big conflict for those women. This is very interesting to begin to see all these myths, these medical myths, and to realize that there's no illness which is related with because you are old, or that projection really doesn't occur. To be ill, you have to have the perception of the conflict. If I don't care about getting old, probably I won't have old symptoms of old people. Okay. The third stage is a good, just one thing. Just to mention that sometimes the perception is conscious, but sometimes it's not that conscious. Like one can go through a conflict, but they don't even realize that they're going through that conflict, or they, not in that intensity, but their body does know that there's a conflict. Just to say that sometimes it's not all that, conscious. It is, in all the cases, the activation of the biological program occurs at an unconscious level. I can't choose to activate it. I can't choose to activate it or not activate it. It's just the way that our psyche is structured. And that is how it's configured by the personal experience, the family, the culture, society, the environments in which I live in. If I have a conflict, what is happening at a psychic level, I will have the biological program. If not, I won't. So most of the time, we are going to realize of how we have the configuration of the program when we see it expressed in the biological, when we see it in the biological expression. That is what Hammer's information is about. Okay, I think a break. Yeah. 10-minute break, and we finish the fourth and the fifth, and there we kind of finish this module. Okay, so 10-minute break. Okay, guys, excellent. Okay, we're recording, so let's go. Okay. She's got some food in her mouth. Is because she ate very quickly a sandwich. Okay, let's go with the fourth and fifth stage. The conflict which initiates the fourth stage is a conflict we call a conflict of relationships, or of and territory. Conflicts of territory and relationships. At the time, in the timeline, it is the challenge of the mammals, which is between 220 to 200 million years ago, when the first mammals appear. And it refers to the following. And now let's do a review of the previous stages. So we have a life which already exists, which is separated, which has metabolism, and it can transcend itself. It has the capacity. It can protect itself in a different environment. It can change its form when the environment asks it to change that form, to have a better aptitude for each environment. And now in the fourth stage, the challenge is to achieve a group life where there's more than one individual in a territory, and this group of individuals can define its roles, each individual role, in order to have an effective use of that territory. Here, the problems or the conflicts which are related. So, with the relationships in the territory, with the relationship we have with others, and with the relationship we have with the territory. When we talk about territory at a biological sense, we have to understand that territory is the space in which we are living, and also the people and the things which are part of that space. A simple way of configuring our territory, yes, it's being recorded, is to ask ourselves, for who and why am I alive? When I answer in my head that question, I'm going to realize that how I have associated my territory elements, the elements of my territory. For example, if I respond for my children in order to work, for my couple, that answer begins to configure our particular way of configuring the conception of territory. So there are territory conflicts which occur in one's house, and there are other conflicts of territory which happen at work. So we talk about conflicts of the fourth stage. Fourth stage. We're talking about how within the territory the individuals are organized in order for each of them to fulfill a function, and as a group generate what you call it, living together, an ideal living together. An example of this, of a structure of the body which is related with this stage, is, for example, the bronchus of the lung are structures which respond to the type of conflicts of the territory, or a type of territory conflict which we call the conflict of a threat in the territory, which, for example, where there's a fight within the territory. When the individual is having a fight within the territory, and that individual is a male, let's say, the what covers its bronchus begins to lose cells in order to increase the diameter of the bronchus, so there could be a wider entry of oxygen, so it can have more energy to fight in the territory. In the real life, that individual is going to have a type of symptom which we call bronchitis. Bronchitis is the resolution of a conflict which is the fight in the territory. That's an example. Now imagine a conflict of, it's not only we have to take into consideration, we talk about relationships, we're talking about hierarchies within that territory, but also we talk about the way we choose each other to be part of a territory. So, for example, at an unconscious level, the woman, the female, needs to be chosen by the male. To understand this territory conflict, I'm going to ask you to not think about it socially nor like in a human way, but try to think about it biologically. Within a territory of mammals, we need to have the separation between female and male, where the male is going to be the one that dominates, and the female is going to have the functions of organization. If I see it as from the human point of view, I'm going to think it's like an oppression, or it's male chauvinism or something like that. But when you just see it biologically, one becomes aware that it's not just about the woman being chosen by the male, but the male also needs the woman for the organization of the territory. The same way that the female needs that male to have babies in order to have a territory. Here in this fourth stage, there all the conflicts related with the couple, with the relationships in couple. Conflicts to be felt as the chosen one, to feel respected, to feel that I am part of a territory, to feel that nobody's invading my place in the territory. Because remember, the great achievement of this fourth stage is to reach the effective group living together. So we're not talking about one winning over another, but for each part to do the function that it has to do for the living of the group. So a type of conflict, a territory conflict, is the territory threat that I talked to you before. To have to fight for the territory that somebody is going to try and invade. Sometimes because somebody outside comes to invade that territory, in humans, it happens within the house because, for example, the parents are fighting. So the brain of a small child is living within a territory and is part of that territory. And when it perceives like territory threat, a threat in the territory, it can activate a conflict in the bronchus or in the throat, and to have, for example, asthma. Can have asthma. no, just to put a personal example. Yeah, if I'm not sure if you want to finish the explanation, and I'll put my personal example. Okay, whatever. You finish the explanation. Okay, okay. Another type of there we have, for you to understand the conflicts of the territory, we have to see it in two poles, like in two sides, in the balance of two sides of a masculine and feminine. So we have masculine in relation with the threat is to defend, is to fight in the threat. The feminine in the threat in the territory is to shout, asking for help. That's why the women, it affects their throats more. The second type of dynamic within the territory is the dynamic of to feel part of the territory, to belong. So in masculine, I'm going to have that need satisfied when I feel capable of containing all the members of the territory which belongs to me. In feminine, I'm going to feel satisfied when we feel contained and included in the territory which I belong in. So this is an example here. Imagine a woman who's married, who has a husband who has a very beautiful secretary. Very beautiful, great figure. She has a place in the territory because she's the female. But she thinks because it's real or it's symbolic that the husband likes the secretary. Or that the husband is, the female is going to activate a biological conflict in the uterus, cuello del útero, Laura, the uterus, wait, I don't know, cuello del útero. It's the entry of the uterus, cuello del útero. That's the second, right? Cuello del útero. The cervix, it says here. The neck of the uterus, the cervix. At the cervix, producing a loss of cells, which makes the cervix amplify its diameter so it can be more receptive to the male. That way, it becomes available to the male, so she can be chosen instead of the secretary. It's a very biological reading of the situation. This program activates itself in the monkeys, the female monkeys, when the male has to choose its couple. If the woman is chosen by the man, in the resolution part of that conflict, she's going to have a growth of the cells in the cervix, which is called cervix cancer. So the cervix cancer is the solution of a conflict of not being chosen by the male. It's the solution of it. No. This is just an example. So we have a threat in the territory, a belonging in that territory, an identity in that territory. The territory identity is respect. In the masculine, that conflict is lived as like a feeling that somebody is trying to impose himself. If somebody tries to submit, if somebody's trying to submit me, but I am the male, I'm going to respond with the vesicula. Wait. Vesicula. The vesicle or the stomach. Yeah. Okay. The gallbladder. Okay. As a symptom, I can have, for example, gastritis. If it affects my stomach, or the vesicle kind of swollen up. Okay. If it is lived in feminine, I'm not going to feel that somebody is going to trying to impose themselves because I'm not kind of like, let's say, the boss. But in the feminine, I'm going to need for the boss to tell me you do belong and you are somebody. So in the feminine, it is lived as a identity conflict that affects the mucus of the anus, provoking, for example, hemorrhoids. See that we're always talking about territory dynamics. The last, within this dynamic, we have the conflict of a territory invasion, which refers to respecting the limits. Respecting the limits means, in masculine, is to respect the external limits of the territory. In the feminine, to respect the internal limits. A very simple example is like urine infections in the woman, which occurs in adolescence, which when the mothers are always going in their room and they invade their territory, or they're always asking them what are they thinking about. What are they thinking? They are invading their privacy, intimacy. it affects their urine tract, urinary tract, because in a biological way, it limits the territory by weeing in the male and in the woman also. So with these examples, what this fourth stage is about, it is to, through the conflict, try to achieve a dynamic of equilibrium within the group. As the dynamic of equilibrium, of balance, it isn't something which is constant in time, but it repositions ourselves each time the individual changes. A biological example of this is, for example, like if we look at the wolves, a group of wolves, a pack of wolves. While the alpha male is alive, he is the one that protects those who feed, who keep the living together. But when the alpha dies, all the beta wolves enter into a kind of like a challenge to see who's the new alpha. The wolf that is going to win, which has better characteristics as the male. But if you pay attention from that fight, it's very strange that a wolf is going to die in those fights. It's rare that a wolf dies, because when they fight and the other one is more masculine than the other, immediately it shows its neck as a signal of accepting that authority. And after, the new alpha stops fighting with that wolf. There you can see these territory fights aren't destined to kill each other, but to acquire new, to acquire new hierarchies, a new order of living together. This happens with us all the time. In us, the tools of this stage, of the fourth stage, always we enter into a new territory. It makes us position ourselves what would be the most optimum role for us in that territory. Maybe we don't realize this, but unconsciously, when we enter into a space, a territory, our brain is trying to see who's the alpha, who's the beta, and what is the position I can place to understand the dynamic of this fourth stage. Is going to allow us to understand all our family conflicts, all the conflicts of the work dynamics. Now, well, there's two things I was thinking. Well, just one example with the asthma which is very typical in children. I had asthma when I was a child, and my brother had a lot of problems in the bronchi, and it was because the relationship between my father and my mother was very kind of violent. Wasn't harmonious. So it's very typical that those children that have asthma, normally there's some sort of threat in the territory around them, and they are translating it from this fourth stage. Yeah, it's just another one. I think will be interesting for you to say that there is a feminine, like the feminine and masculine doesn't necessarily mean the sex. Yeah, yes, it does, but that there is a female male aspect, and biologically, yeah, that would be interesting to see. And also maybe the type of organs, or the type with this, which is the territory, it are the ones that are receiving information outside, like the listening, the seeing, the skin, and also probably put the, for them to understand the relationship between the type of organs and the type of stage. So this is what David said. That's why I talk about feminine and masculine, because the beings, we have both capacities within our brain. We have the masculine way of responding, conflicts of territory, and the female way of responding within each of us. The natural is that in a group of humans, the woman occupies the female, the
Ok, háblales. Hagamos al revés, yo puedo seguir explicando desde allá.
No, me parece que te tengo a ti. No sé. Bueno, vamos a hacer este.
Pero puedo. Bueno, explícales.
¿Ya está el audio?
Sí.
Okay, guys, what's happened is that the Wi-Fi isn't working, which I was using it, but the internet is. So what we're going to do for this last part, am I going to go in front?
There. ¿O no? Yes, perdón. Yes, no.
Not sure. Okay, so I'm just gonna translate this last part like this way. I'm not
Sí, te
sure.
puedo llamar, ¿verdad? Seguro. Y te lo termino explicando.
Ah, okay. Okay, so now you're gonna see me with my voice. Okay. Did you cancel the spotlight video? Or is that the?
No, déjalo segundo.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Actually, this way it looks like giving a political speech, you know, like these people who are, it seems like they're saying really great things, but they're listening. So now I'm going to become a specialist in biology. Okay. So go. We were seeing the masculine and feminine. And I was talking about there is no existence of, there's no separation in a living being of the masculine and the feminine. In our brain, both the masculine and the feminine answers are like coded. So what is natural within a group is for the woman to have a female role and the man to have a male role. But if for any certain reason, the male or the female isn't available, then the female can have male functions or the male can have female functions. So it's important to take into consideration that we all have the possible answers within ourselves. The issue is going to occur when within a territory everyone wants to be male and everyone wants to be female, or the other way around. So the conflicts of relationship are useful to order the functions within the territory. And that way one can achieve for the group to keep functional. As the fourth stage is the one in charge of transcending the individual as a biological unit. So the group becomes more important than the individual. An example of species which have achieved this stage are what we call superorganisms. For example, the bees, ants, they are species which have achieved transcend the individual functions and sum them and add them to achieve a new order which is more complex and which is more functional than the individuals by themselves. Okay, so when we have conflicts of this fourth stage, what we are trying to do is to organize our territories. And the parts of our body which respond to that are those related with keeping the order in the territory and to contact with the individuals of that territory. A common example is the epidermis of our skin, which activates itself when the individual is having a conflict of contact, be it because it wants a contact that it hasn't got, or because it doesn't want an imposed contact. That is an example. If you guys understand the fourth stage, maybe put the example of your sister with the skin, or no, it's not a good example. The example of your sister in this, the rash, look at, okay, an example of this comes her sister, for example, when she become a widow with 30, what, 35, 36, in a very, unexpected way. The husband was young and died in about a month. From that point onwards, her sister began to have a rash, skin rash, in the interior part of the arms and behind her, the knees. She would scratch and it would hurt. It would get sore. The biological meaning or sense of that manifestation is to increase the contact in that area. Because in the places that she had the rash were the places where the husband used to hug her when, like, and behind the knees, it's where, when they went to sleep, is where the husband, would do contact with her. So that's a symptom. That's a symptom of this fourth stage of contact with the skin, with the territory, and with the relationships. Okay, should we move on to five? There's a question of Laura. Heart attack is due to territorial conflict. Question. No, heart, corazón. Yes, it belongs to that stage, yeah, heart attack. It's belonging, and normally it's a more masculine function of containing the members of the territory. When I feel that I lose a member of the territory or lose the territory, a possible effect is a heart attack. But it's a resolution, but yes, it is related. Okay, should we go on the fifth stage? Okay. The fifth stage is the most modern stage, the fifth stage. this is a type of conflict that Hammer did not describe. But he didn't describe it because he probably didn't have the time. If he had had the time, most probably he would have found it, included it. This type of conflict is a more modern conflict, belonging more to the the gender, the homo gender. And it's related with self-awareness. It begins more or less 1.5 million years ago. We find the first register of what we call the mystical thinking or magical thinking. And this type of thought is possible because in the homo gender, the development of the front part of the cortex takes place. The part of the front of the brain, and that area of the brain allows to have a type of thinking process which is an abstract thinking. That abstract thinking allows them to be able to see themselves beyond themselves. An example is the notion of time. The notion of time is only possible with an abstract type of thinking. We can only become aware of the past and the future if we are aware of the present. What is believed is that this type of thinking emerges about 1.5 million years ago, and the first kind of evidence of this is that there is burying ceremonies. Those burying ceremonies have the following idea. Imagine you are a Homo erectus who are walking through your territory and affective relationships, and suddenly a person who is older, like your mother, let's say, dies. When having self-awareness, when we become aware that she dies, it is to assume the possibility that I can also die. If she is not there, there's a possibility that I am no longer going to be here. So one begins to generate a type of conflict which we call existential conflict, which is the conflict with this idea of non-existence. Like, like the questions, who am I, where do I come from, where am I going? These type of conflicts generate within the individual what we call magical thinking, meaning we begin to look for answers as what happens when I'm no longer here. That existential emptiness that death produces, we fill it with answers about that death. For example, my mother didn't die. She's living in a cloud. Or she reborn in this, like as the stone. This type of conflicts, which is very human, emerges the what we call the systems, belief systems, in order to establish a relationship with non-existence, with the non-existent. This is a very present conflict for us. As for us, we still have the life, the afterlife as a great uncertainty. This type of conflict generates in the individual symptoms, for example, anxiety, it affects the areas of the body which have to do with speed and rhythm, like the thyroid ducts, the thyroid, or the bronchial ducts. When these programs activate within the human, humans have this feeling of anxiety. Anxiety is it's trying to anticipate a future. It's a type of biological answer to the existential conflict. Because what we're afraid of, that uncertain future, our body tries to try and anticipate to that uncertainty. This is a conflict which has very little time of development, which has us as humans as the main actors, the protagonists. As the meaning for Earth of this conflict is to achieve the consciousness of the awareness of consciousness. Self-awareness, so for consciousness to become conscious of itself. If you begin to see humans as a part of Earth, we would be the cells which provide Earth its own consciousness, the consciousness of itself, the consciousness of where it is, and the consciousness of where it's going towards. So the existential conflict is always going to generate the need of new answers. The answers which we find are going to have like expire date, because the biological intention is to expand the awareness, the consciousness of itself. So it can't be stopped. Meaning, we are always going to have existential crises. Every time our system of our answer system, our beliefs, our answers become small or not good enough, we enter into the existential conflict of wanting to know what else there is to know, in order to install more amplified answers, more wider answers. This means that this emptiness we're trying to fill, or trying to fill, is not something we can really fill. Because if we were able to fill that emptiness, we would lose our biological function. This biological function. Okay, so that would be kind of like the explanation of this first stage, the existential conflict for self-awareness. So kind of any questions, or here can we kind of wrap up? Probably one question is, why the thyroid? What has the thyroid got to do with anything with this fifth stage? O sea, la tiroide, ¿por qué la tiroide? ¿Qué sentido tiene la tiroide con todo esto? Yeah. It's okay. It's the thyroid duct, the gland. It's not the gland that's affected. It's the ducts of the thyroid. Yeah, but why that? Okay. Because the thyroid duct, what they had is a function. They had a function of being able to send the thyroid hormone to the blood system, straight to the blood. So they accelerate the metabolism in a very fast way. when the thyroid duct, when going through this existential conflict, the thyroid duct begins to lose its cells. What it does is it sends more of this hormone to the blood, which allows the metabolism of the individual to accelerate, and that is the function of this hormone. So it can prepare itself better to reach that future. And that's the biological sense, purpose, which is related with management of time in existential. Yeah? Okay, so not sure if you guys have what? Okay, if you have no questions, Carla's going to just wrap up. So it's now or never. Or maybe you can ask it later, probably in the WhatsApp, whatever. I've got a direct contact with Carla. She's a very good friend of mine. So if there's no questions right now, wrap up. I'm not sure if someone's writing. But okay, do the wrap up. Wait. She's asking, what is PFC in the 5th stage? Prefrontal cortex, isn't it? Yes, prefrontal cortex. Yeah. Okay, so to sum up, and what is all this useful for you guys? To understand these 5 stages allows us to know how all our conflicts are configured, as all our day-to-day conflicts are summed up in these 5 types of conflicts. So one can have a conflict, a survival conflict of protection, of aptitude, of relationships, territory, or existential conflicts. The important thing when realizing that you are having one of these conflicts is not to eliminate the conflict or to think that the conflict is a mistake. But for you to understand that the biology uses these conflicts as a way of maturing new answers, new responses. So the biological conflicts are unavoidable because they are a tool of evolution in themselves. What can be avoided is not kind of exploiting the possibility of the conflict. So what we can do in our day-to-day lives is to recognize the conflict and exploited to get out all the learning from that conflict. Because if we avoid, ignore, or repress the conflict, what we are repressing is the opportunity of being more biologically fit, we would say. To understand that the conflicts are going to wake up every time we change in our environment, and to allow us to go through that challenge or that conflict. It allows us to use the tool that biology has to mature as individuals. Instead of avoiding the conflicts or the illness, to learn how to use these biological responses of learning how to evolve as living beings. Excellent. Exploiting the conflicts is taking advantage. It's taking the juice out of the conflicts. It's like using the conflict as a mechanism. That's the exploiting. So, okay. So, I've done my job. My brain is not going to be existing today. So, well. That's it, yeah. So say, I took lots of notes. Happy to share soon. Okay, excellent. So you can share, guys. And I'm talking with you on the phone. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks to Carla for this opportunity. And for you guys to have this vision of the work of Hammer and this kind of biological point of view, which is, I think, very important to kind of complete the puzzle, yeah? So any questions, you can always use the WhatsApp group, and I can ask Gara and give you the feedback. For now, probably process it because it's some new kind of a new point of view. And thanks a lot to all of you.
Thanks.
Now I'm going to do something that is not using my brain.
Well,
thanks a lot. Take care.
Gracias.
Bye bye.
Gracias.
Netflix, yeah, probably.
Gracias.
Bye. Thanks a lot.
Bye bye.
Bye.